a little bit about this. There's a lot to talk about, actually. Farah, I will start with you, if that's all right. What do you make of Suella's comments about this kind of headlong approach to multiculturalism at all costs? Nice on paper, but in practice, if you haven't got the infrastructure, possibly a problem?
I have to say, I understand where it's coming from. I think us as a society, we have fixated too much on the past and we need to move forward. You know, if we do talk about the issue, the elephant room, slavery, that was a very long time ago, hundreds of years ago. And I don't think it's acceptable. People are being penalised today for actions of ancestors hundreds of years ago. Why don't we look at the figures right now of modern slavery? It's over 50, no, it's just under 50 million. And that's something that we should be talking about. Why are we not addressing modern slavery today? So I do feel it's good to have these discussions. I'm glad she actually said what she said, because it's led to a wider discussion which we do need to have.
Dr. Sam, can I bring you in now on the idea of people maybe who are a bit left behind in all of this? And I wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of white working class boys thing. People get sneered at when they talk about this, but actually that is a demographic of people who are not doing particularly well at the minute, Dr. Sam. I mean, is that accurate? And if so, why not?
Yeah, so it is accurate in some ways. There are certain aspects, certain points of young white working class boys' lives, for instance, where they don't perform very well on average as a group. For instance, in terms of accessing higher education, going to university, we know that they're one of the lowest performing groups there. So there is definitely some justification in focusing on that group when we want to talk about issues of educational justice or social mobility and what's going wrong with those things. But as with so many of these debates, that shouldn't be at the exclusion of other groups who also perform almost as badly. And in terms of other stages of the education system, in terms of how they do it there, in their A-levels, their access to apprenticeships, in terms of school exclusions, it's other groups who fare worse. So these things are really complex. I think it's fine to have a debate about white working class boys. I don't think people should be sneered at for wanting to have that discussion. But there's kind of a long queue of disadvantaged groups who will have a justified place in that in wider debates too.
Yeah, indeed. And Farah, kind of on this, but moving it on slightly, do you have any sympathy for people who maybe feel as though this push for tolerance and inclusivity, which is in itself obviously a very good thing, right, is actually maybe at the detriment of people who are living here who don't necessarily want to see their areas change irreversibly and are maybe called racist or marginalised for doing that and silenced from talking about that kind of stuff? And I think maybe that is an element that Suella Braverman's tapping into here, about this idea that fast-paced multiculturalism is having a negative impact on the psychology of people who are here now.
I think personally, I do a lot of mentoring. I work with lots of communities across London. I work with lots of white communities, but also ethnic minority communities. And yes, some do welcome it and some do, take it as an attack. And I think that's a problem in society when we are not moving along in society. We all want to see improvement, advancements, especially working with a lot of ethnic minority children. I do a lot of mentoring, and they obviously feel that there's a lots of opportunities not open to them. But at the same time, when I mentor white young youth, they feel the same because they feel that preference is given to ethnic minorities now and they're being left aside. And, I've even talked to adults who are looking for work after university, and they find that they are struggling to get work because of being white. And then again, you've got the other argument where, you've got ethnic minorities who also feel the same. So I do feel it is a wider subject.
Can I just ask you to elaborate on that a little bit, Farah, before I go back to Dr. Sam on it? So what kind of things are they saying to you then when they're saying, look, I feel as though I'm struggling to get work because I'm white? What's that about?
Well, here you go. Perfect example. Let me give you one example. I was speaking to a young white man. He's 26. He says he knows that he gets put aside because now whenever you fill out an application form, it asks you, are you from an ethnic minority at the end? So then if you tick it, you know that you might not be, merited on your actual CV, your credibility. But if someone actually ticks that box, because a company needs to hire someone who's ethnic, they're going to be put forward above the rest. So it's even venture capital. When you're applying for venture capital now, at the end of every application form, they ask you, are you from an ethnic minority? Are you a female? Because it's been unearthed that they have obviously not given much money to ethnic minority communities or people looking for funding. So there's this whole drive, and everyone's talking about it. I know people who are white, who are black, who have noticed that all of a sudden, most of the adverts now, all the companies are trying to put more ethnic people into the adverts, but it's gone into an overdrive where, it's showing that they're doing it on purpose. So it is quite a big discussion that I do have with white people, black people, Chinese even. And
it is a big discussion. It is, and you are right to identify. I mean, I have this conversation regularly with people of all different religious backgrounds and cultural backgrounds as well, and it is kind of something that everybody notices. And I suppose just in terms of the CV side of things that you were saying, there are job applications. There's a case to be had, isn't there, for completely blind applications? Of course, there is also quite a good case against that. But Dr. Sama, I'll bring you back in on this now. In terms of with your cap as a social researcher on, okay, I suppose multiculturalism at this pace that we're seeing at the minute, on paper, fantastic idea, potentially, and it's about, I suppose, whether or not integration goes with that as well, and whether or not people feel as though that we are at risk of having societies within societies. And I think that is, again, something that Suella Braverman was alluding to there. Is there the reality that we are heading towards kind of pockets of society? It's not going to be this big, unified, diverse society that maybe people would hope for.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of research evidence demonstrating the fact that in some parts of cities, for instance, that are seen as multicultural, actually different groups of people live quite separate lives. There's even research, attaching GPS trackers to taxis, showing that certain cab firms are used by different people from different backgrounds, and they travel around the city quite separately in that way. Quite remarkable social trends. But I think sometimes we look at what we observe at face value in society, and we make the mistake of thinking, well, there's some kind of underlying law at play here that we can never achieve a society or, live in a city where actually there's mixing and there's equality. Often it's because there's some other factor at play, like poverty or like low household incomes or people really struggling. So normally there's something else actually that's causing the difficulty. It's not that there's some inherent law that we can never achieve that state that we want.
Look, both of you, I really, really enjoyed that, actually. Go on, Farah. I could tell you were itching to get involved there. Go on, quickly.
It's important. We need to celebrate culture. Culture is a beautiful thing, and we need to celebrate that without extinguishing it. But at the same time, it's about intersectionality. We need to put focus on intersectionality. That's what's missing.
All right, look, both of you, thank you very much. Sorry, Sam, I haven't got time to go back to you as well, but there we go. Look,